Right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight for our VIA webinar. Tonight we have Harry Appleby, who is the Site Technical Manager at Owlsmere from ABP. Harry oversees everything legal, quality, food safety, animal welfare and customers for our flagship site there at Owlsmere. He's also a key customer account from a technical perspective, and he's been working with ABP for over 9 years across both beef and lamb, primary and retailer processing, and has a background in animal science, poultry, and previous to this, he worked in the poultry production industry. So Harry's going to guide us through a presentation, and then there'll be time for questions afterwards. So if you do have a question, you can either type it in the chat or we'll go on to the questions afterwards. So Harry's just about to share his screen. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Harry. And as I say, if you've got any questions, just remember them. And when we get to the end, we'll do all the questions at the end. Over to you. Thanks, Harry.
No worries. Thank you, Katie. So hopefully you can see my screen now. If you can't, please do shout. So yeah, thank you for the introduction, and happy to come along and hopefully give you some insight into VIA and what it means, and how we've actually embedded it into the business since we went through trials, approvals, etc. Like I said, if there is any questions at the end, please feel free to ask. I guess in terms of kicking off, we probably go right back to the start. History of VIA grading systems. The development of the pattern of the VIA system was developed between 1993 and 1998, patent registered in 1994. Major developments ongoing from there, really. It kind of kicked off from there, and there was a lot of investment and a lot of understanding building from that point. Commercial installation and trials. So the first commercial installation occurred in 1998, followed by European Commission trials in Ireland during 1999 and 2000. EU approval and rollout after those trials and installations. The VBS 2000 received EU approval in 2003. So that's the beef grading system, leading to the installation 24 machines as that part of the rollout. Once you had that rollout of them 24 machines, you then had the kind of adoption phase where you went through the embedding it into the system and getting the data back. So by 2005, the VBS 2000 was widely accepted in Ireland, and it received its first official EU inspection in 2008 with excellent results. We'll go on to the accuracy, etc. later on to give you an insight on what that looks like now. In terms of international expansion, it pretty much boomed from there. The VBS 2000 was approved in Uruguay in 2010, expanded to Northern Ireland and England by 2014, and underwent upgrades and approval processes in subsequent years, including in Belgium by 2024. I guess a lot of that with time, you kind of get more confidence in the system, you go through those learnings, and you get the understanding of the background and what it can offer you as a business and as a whole supply chain, I guess. So the machine that we use is supplied by a company called Marel. So Marel are an Icelandic company. They're a software-based company who pretty much design and implement a huge amount of the meat processing equipment that we use across the beef industry and across the meat industry. They're a global player, so you do have a lot of equipment from abattoir systems right through to retail cutting processing equipment. So they are one of the major players, like I say, based out of Iceland, a huge amount of backing financially in the business. Advanced vision system based on VIA was what we had installed. So you have a video and an image analysis, deep learning. You have algorithms behind this. It's tested up to 450 cattle per hour. So as you can imagine, not everyone is running at that speed, but it has to be able to cope with a line speed of kind of, I would say, the worst case in terms of being able to handle that many data points per hour. There's 65 machines in daily use in Ireland, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Belgium, Uruguay, Argentina, and Australia. Of these, more than 55 million cattle graded up to today. And the upcoming installations are happening in Romania and Sweden. So again, similar to the last slide, it's an ongoing adoption around the world and globally as different players see it embedding itself and kind of becoming day-to-day technology within the meat industry. Others are starting to adopt it and see the benefits really. So there's a short video here just showing exactly what it looks like. You've got a stop and go version for line speeds of up to 120 cattle per hour. So that's the type of machine that you would see in Ellesmere and in pretty much all of the ABP sites there. We have the continuous version, like we mentioned in the previous one, for the likes of the USA that have huge plants, multiple lines. At a time coming into one grading line, they could be handling up to 450 cattle per hour. European approval for the VBS 2000 in France, Ireland, Northern Ireland, England and Scotland is obviously there, and then also approved by INAC in Uruguay. All the official approval tests have been successful following the first attempt. So it's not like they've had to go through loads and loads of attempts to get approval. It's fairly standard now as a method. And again, that just comes from it kicked off back in the early 90s, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of development that's gone into them. And now you'd be looking at a huge database. I mean, for ABP alone, there'd be a significant database. And it's like any kind of deep learning technology now. It reinforces its learning as it goes. So it's linked to the IT system. So in Ellesmere, we have IT systems that are linked. So we have a payment system and we have an Innova system. And the Innova system follows it right through the factory. So you can get individual animal ID and a hot carcass weight that links from that initial grading, and it follows the carcass right through. So all the systems are kind of interlinked, and again, that's kind of part of a blueprint that we would have in ABP now, where the systems, if we were to buy an abattoir, which is similar to how we've done in the last couple of years as a business of acquisition, it's literally you've got a standard blueprint that you can put on a site and you can roll it into others. So it's fairly, I'm playing it down by saying it's fairly plug and play, but the technology is thus that you've got a lot of confidence to be able to start working with these systems fairly quick. So in terms of the VBS 2000 grading system, you got another visual there. So these kind of images are what you would see on the line if you come into the abattoir and seen any of the carcasses being graded. Essentially, one side of the carcasses will go past, and it will essentially present one side of the carcass up to the camera. It will take loads of cross sections of the carcass, and it will essentially throw light onto the carcass, and it will understand, okay, where's the definition in the muscle? Is it more defined in this point? Is it less defined? And that's where it then starts building up a kind of like a 3D image in its head of how dense this area of the carcass is. All of the lines that you see going on the carcass there then have data points behind them, where the system will actually be looking at it and going, okay, if I'm looking at this data point, it means this number, and then it translates into X at the end of the calculation. But that is exactly the image that you would see on the factory floor. We have VIA grading in place, but we also have manual grading in place. So for all of our machines, you won't just rely on the machine being there. Machines break, they go down, etc. So you'd always have a manual grader at the point as well, and they'll be working with that system day in, day out. And then, so really just how it works. So the first image, kind of alluded to it earlier on, you've got the 2D image with normal light conditions like human eyes. So as we would look at a carcass, it extracts a 2D image and measurements. So similar to the image on the right there, you can see it's mapping out the image and taking measurements to understand how big is this carcass, what are the dimensions of the carcass, linear measurements overall and segmented. So all of these areas in the carcass are kind of extracted out into individual areas, and then they'll form into a data pool. The length and the width, the angles, the areas, and the colors. So it'll also look at what's the distribution of fat over the carcass as well, because then it can plot how much fat is over the sirloin, how much fat falls through. And essentially it's then building up that 2D image in its head to then lay over a second image. So the 3D image then comes. So I've got a visual of what the carcass looks like from a 2D level, and I can take my various measurements and I can see where my fat lies and where it doesn't. And then we overlay the 3D image where we throw light over them, structured light, use triangulation of 28 lines over the carcass. So the lines there that are overshadowing that will create around 200 data points for each line. So that's 5,600 3D points across that whole image for each carcass side. And then you have 3D measurements extracted from this image. So it's volumes, depth, like I say, how the light falls on the carcass creates almost definition. So if you go closer to a shadow, it looks bigger. When you come away from a shadow, it looks smaller. So this image is then giving a 3D dimensional expression of the carcass. So you've already got your 2D and you've got your measurements. This then overlays, well, how far back is that? How deep is it, etc. for each of the muscles. So straight lines on the straight back plate, curved lines on the carcass, different convex and concave curves at the round and the back, helping in an accurate prediction of conformation and yield. So this system will essentially use that 2D and 3D image to pull out data that then says, okay, based on the 2D and the 3D details, this is what you would expect over this side of the carcass. And as we follow through, and this is what it then translates to into a grade, fat class, etc. So more than 200 physical objective measures are extracted from each carcass. The linear measurements, colors, areas, and volumes usable also directly from the carcass assessment. The measurements are used to calculate classification, like conformation and fat class. And then measurements are used to calculate yield information as well. So there's a lot of data that can come out of it. And I guess, again, it's similar to any system at the moment. Again, it's continually reinforcing its learning and understanding it, and it's giving itself more confidence in the data as well. So once you actually pop a carcass through this system, it will then give you in quite a good level of detail the Europe score, and then you've also got the 1- through to 5+. So you've got a really granular level of detail. Again, when you compare it to a human eye, we'll go through accuracy shortly, but if you think of the 2D and the 3D image, we can only see a 2D image because we can't throw light and do calculations in our mind of what it actually translates to. So what you're overlaying onto this is an objective piece that's consistent every time, but you're also out of that 2D, but you're also throwing the 3D element on there as well to give you a lot more data. So in terms of the advantages of using VIA, you've got 50% higher accuracy than required by EU legislation. So there's 36,000 carcasses have been checked by the Department of Agriculture in 2022. So if you then lay on how many readings we have per carcass, if you go, okay, there's 28 lines and we take 200 data points from each of those lines, and then you times it by 36,000 carcasses, you then have a lot of data and a lot of confidence behind that. It then gives you more reliability and validity behind that data to be able to say, okay, this is the confidence we can put on that number. And what that translates to is a 94% score for confirmation class, and we're actually by law only required to have 60%. So again, you're going a hell of a lot above and beyond what is actually required. And then 64.75 score for fat class, so 60% required. More than 97% accuracy for both class with new developments. So again, the goal as well is not to stay where you are, it's to actually get better and better and get more confidence and a lot more accuracy. So it's more transparent for not only the producer but also for the processor and the end customer. Assessments are non-destructive, so there's a lot of quality systems out there in New Zealand, in Australia, in America. Some will use non-destructive and some will use obstructive and invasive. It's really dependent on what you're looking at when it comes to a quality perspective, but it has to be cost effective and it has to be automatic. So when you're doing a line of and processing 3,500 lambs a day, or whether you're doing in America 450 carcasses per hour, it has to be applicable and fully automatic and actually work without having stops and starts all the time. It removes any real or perceived human error. So, like I say on the left, you would be increasing the reliability from the system when you take it out of human errors hands, essentially. Removes the doubt from the producer's mind as well, because a machine doesn't have feelings and a machine doesn't really have an off day unless someone turns the machine off. This VIA system has an algorithm behind it, and it's you're validating it as well. So in the mornings you'll come up, you'll calibrate your machines, you'll make sure that the system is reading what it needs to. Similar to if you're in a retail room, you would check your metal detector works in the morning. We would check that the VIA is calibrated and ready for the day first thing in the morning, and it confirms to itself, yes, I'm reading and translating the information as I should. The images are recorded of every carcass and can be shown at any time later. So if there's any particular carcass that's been graded and any doubt or any confusion or anything that needs to be checked, we do store those images and they're held with the GM and the general managers so they can be accessed at any point to address any concerns or any challenges or any confirmations on any elements. And I guess, yeah, finally, it's a widely accepted method in the industry. It's considered an objective and an impartial method for grading carcasses. It's well in place in terms of ABP, and I talk to a lot of the retailers day to day. And again, it's not just for the processor; it's for the producer as well as the retailer having the confidence. You have to have the regardless of whether it's the producer's mind, the processor's mind, or the retailer and the consumer at the end, it removes any doubt if you put a machine on a measure to make sure that it's consistent and repeatable. Essentially, you want to be able to put this carcass on the line, show it to the computer, take it away and put it back, or take it away and represent it five animals back, and it comes out with exactly the same measurements. And that's what you have when you use an automatic machine, essentially. But yeah, that's kind of a top line summary of what VIA is, what it offers us, and what it looks like in the background of how it came to be in terms of its place in industry at the moment, as well as its place in ABP, I guess, as a method, really. I think you're on mute there, Katie.
Yeah, it would help if I unmuted myself. Thanks, Harry. If anyone's got any questions, you can either use the raise your hand function or type questions in the chat. Helen's got a question there. Helen, if you want to unmute yourself and
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, we're a producer that goes all the way through, having our own suckler herd and then producing direct for ABP.
Oh.
I don't have a problem with the system at all. In fact, I really like it. I like the consistency. So all of my animals that go to slaughter, I record all of their slaughter data.
Oh.
The biggest problem I'm having is having the animal on farm and the number that comes back. Are you planning to give us at any point the 3D carcass images along, like in a PDF or something, as and when we get the slaughter data back? Because I'm looking at carcass weight to make sure I'm getting the right carcass weight. That's important to me. But whereas I could look at a steer or a heifer before and say, yes, that's a 3, that's a 4L, that's a 4H, I'm moving too far, I can't yet get to the point in the grid where I want to be. And obviously, because I'm picking genetics and I know what I'm breeding from,
Yeah.
that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, understood. In terms of the feedback from a business perspective at the moment, I would probably say myself or Katie would have to go back and double check what the stance will be on the future of that data communication. I don't know, Katie, if you know any more on that.
When I spoke to the guys at Owlsmere, they said anyone can go in, and I guess it would be the same in any plant. So when you take any cattle in, Helen, you can always go and ask to see the images of the previous cattle that you sent in. But I don't think they will be releasing images out
Right.
of the plant just because of the way things could be used with others, etc. But you know, as you've heard, the consistency and it's not subjective. Like a person, when you're grading things, could be very subjective, and so.
Yeah.
But you're more than welcome to go into the plant at any point to see
100%.
those images.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
I would
love
definitely.
to, because our groups tend to go in quite large groups, so we're talking 20 or 30 animals at a time. For my
Yeah.
own sanity, I'd like to take pictures of the 30 as they look like walking around the yard, and then see what those carcasses look like, so I can tally the two back up.
Yeah, certainly on a one-off basis, or like ad hoc, not like a routine, like Katie said, in terms of sending the images out. If you've got animals going in and you've got 20 that have gone in this week and it's not quite tallying up and it's unexpected, that's definitely where that feedback and that communication and the ability to go in and go through that with a general manager is there, and can be accessed through the livestock team. So if you speak to the livestock team and say, I'd like to go through the images from an ABP perspective, we're fairly transparent with that in terms of being open and can share those images
Brilliant, thank you.
and go through them.
Thanks, Helen. Derry?
Yeah. I think it shows somewhere the data you collect gives you your grade, but also it estimates the retail yield of the meat of the carcass.
So it's more a carcass yield. So some
Carcass
companies
yield.
would use it, yeah. It does to a degree when you go into the likes of, I don't know if you've heard of, you may have done DEXA scanning. So DEXA scanning is a method that's also used in Australia and New Zealand, and it's essentially an X-ray style machine, and that actually gives you quite an in-depth level of yield essentially. But from a VIA perspective, it will give you a yield based on the 2D and the 3D and the prediction. So when you validate one of these methods, essentially you'd have to build up so much data behind it to say, okay, when I plug in these 100 carcasses, this is what the data that I come out with, and then you yield the animals to then tally up what that means and what that translates to. That's how you'll also, a lot of these systems will build that data and be able to give that that measure as well. But it's worth pointing out that it's different to other scanning methods that will actually take a almost like an X-ray image of a carcass. So it is just still using the 2D and the 3D image. It doesn't like scan right through like our conventional X-rays essentially.
So could you give an indication if you've got two carcasses, both graded, I'll just say R4L, how big a different variation could you see in the yield from those carcasses?
I'd have to double check on that level of granularity, to be fair. It's probably one of the questions we'd have to ask the tech guys, the technology guys as well, in terms of that level of detail. But yeah, it's with a lot of these systems, there's also a lot of background data as well to a lot of this, what you see on the face of it. And then behind it is loads of algorithms and metrics and how it actually works it all out and how you can get that difference between two. If you've got an R3L of both and then you've got a yield difference in both, how does it determine that? It's probably along those 228 and 200 measurements that come from it. That then, although you've got a grade, you've then got a difference in the yield as well when you actually then partner it with the weight that comes off of the hot weight that comes off of the carcass. But that's the benefit, I guess, of having one of these systems as well is all of these measures and all of these data points will it all be feeding into the algorithm essentially. So there'll be data behind it is where I'm coming from as well.
Okay, so how far away are we from getting paid on yield using this system?
Pass. I wouldn't know the answer to that from a business perspective. Yeah, not sure whether Katie, if you've got a different perspective.
I don't know the answers, but I have written down the one about the yield on the VIA, and I'll take that back and see if we can get an answer on that. And the one about, I haven't heard of anything that would be changing to be paid on yield at all, but I'll ask the question, and then hopefully if I get the answers by the time I send the recording round, I can pop that on there.
Yeah,
we'll let you know directly, Dowie, if it's a bit longer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rob.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm like Helen. I think it's really good systems, far better than it used to be. My only issue is when you say you calibrate the machines, are they calibrated? Like say I take cattle to Ellesmere and Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
They don't give the same readings.
As
I don't
in,
think. One of them is a grade higher than the other at the minute. So they're obviously not calibrated together. Do the ministry calibrate them, or does ABP calibrate them, or?
So the machines will be calibrated daily internally, but the ministry will be coming around regularly. So they have their visits that they have to do mandatory to verify what we're doing and how we're managing the kit, how we're managing the process, and to confirm that we're in line with what's required. I guess to your point on the difference between two sites, that's definitely a valid piece for you to raise to your livestock teams, if there is a concern there, because that's where the transparency and being able to go into the GMs and be able to go through the images and confirm that there's that open challenge piece there. And I would suggest just use that network as well if you're concerned that there's a difference. But from a system perspective, it should operate exactly the same. There's no secret switch in the back to change it to more sensitive or anything like that. This system is completely locked down. It works automatically, and you would expect a system to do that, whether you have, like, this is a legally mandated method, so you wouldn't want a system to be able to be to lose its confidence that you need from it, if that makes sense, and the transparency. But certainly, like I say, if there's concerns there, that's where that open network to be able to question it through the livestock teams and the GM is there for openly.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What about, like we chat about the Australian system about marbling? Is that system, would we be able to do that with your system?
With you're referring to like intramuscular fat and grading on intramuscular fat. Yeah, so it's an interesting point. So in the Australian and the New Zealand market, you would see intramuscular fat being measured quite consistently in some sites in Australia. And I visited one a few years ago just to understand the technology. And essentially, like, they'll use probes and they'll go into the spine of the animal, into the longismus dorsi and the muscle, and they'll essentially take a reading to understand what the intramuscular fat level is. And they'll use that to drive breeding. There'll be values placed onto that. There'll be importance and metrics into an index. In Australia, there's a consumer that also likes that intramuscular fat. They associate it with good, healthy, a healthy diet, essentially, to have that intramuscular fat in meat.
Yeah.
I think there's a question still in the UK of, is the UK consumer wanting marbling in their product? You'll see with a lot of consumers, they'll go to a certain point where they go, okay, that's okay marbling. But then there's a point where they'll switch off and they'll say that's too fat for me, I don't want to have it, it's unhealthy. So I think there's still that piece there where we've definitely got a different consumer to Australia and New Zealand who are using this to, okay, I want to drive intramuscular fat into my sire lines and then cascade it down, and kind of really place importance onto that into my breeding system. But I think there's a few elements to it. Is the tech ready, and is it ready to be cascaded to the UK? And then is the consumer ready, and is it meaningful to the consumer? Does the consumer want it, essentially? So if we start grading for IMF, is it going to recover itself as well, if that makes sense? You want a degree of it, but to place, when you start putting it into grading mechanisms, it's then what price do we put on that, if that makes sense.
100%.
So it's a really interesting point, and like I say, in Australia and New Zealand, they're starting. I don't think they're fully there, if that makes sense. They're not kind of like the Osmeat where there's a set piece there, where in a lot of systems, comparing New Zealand and Australia is a bit more invested in it. New Zealand isn't quite there, and again, I think it's just sometimes it's a bit of a consumer difference. If, like Wagyu, for example, some people will be fully invested into Wagyu and some people won't, and some people won't even know what it is, and what intramuscular fat means. But yeah, it's an interesting point at the moment. Unsure if the UK will go there, but it's an interesting point that I guess as a business like others will be keeping a close eye on it, in terms of what it means. But it's definitely what both sides of the factor mean, because ultimately at the end of everything we do, we have a consumer at the end of it that's going to pay a certain price for a product, essentially.
Very good, thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, and just to reiterate, obviously the machine should be working the same across different plants, different regions, different countries, the same. They're all calibrated the same. So definitely, maybe next time you take some cattle up, speak to the livestock guys, and they'll be more than happy to show you the images and go through that with you to try and iron out what issues there might be there. Hopefully there aren't any, but yeah, do speak to them and get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, it just, to be honest, it's got better, so I'm quite happy.
Okay. Has anybody else got any other questions this evening? No more hands. No, thank you, Harry, for sharing your knowledge on BIA. It's
good.
It's definitely it's great that it takes the subjectivity out, and it's more consistent, and that it is the same rules apply for all. Because I remember years ago at AHDB people saying that if you just speak nicely to the grader, you'll get an extra grade, which that's just bonkers that could have ever happened when there was physical graders in there. That should never happen. It should be consistent for the cattle going through and you getting rewarded, and consistency both for the farmers, the processors and the buyers, and reduce any disputes obviously in that respect. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us.
No problem.
Hope it's helped all you guys that have joined us this evening, and hope you have a nice rest of your evening, whatever you're up to. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Next week we've got a webinar on mental health with Sharon May, who's done a Nuffield in this, looking at this all over the world. So hopefully we'll see you at 7 o'clock next week to talk about mental health. Thanks, guys. Thanks again for this evening.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you.